Good morning. Welcome to a tertiary world. This morning I continue to read memories that arose as I walked down Elgin Street, one of 7 east-west streets that I walked down in 2008, in order to retrieve or re-experience or understand better the kind of life that I lived somewhere along those streets inside a grid that was made up of 7 north-south and 7 east-west streets. Elgin Street is the second east-west street. Its colour is orange. This memory is blue. It's of 183 Elgin Street, the ex-Roma Cafe. The first time I walked into the newly opened Roma Cafe was for a specific reason, though the Sicilian owner had been nicknamed Mattone, meaning the brick, by Piero from Tamani, obviously referring to the Sicilians' supposed lack of empathy for anyone other than his son. I wanted to ask him whether he would be kind enough to sponsor the soccer team I was coaching. To enthuse the team, I wanted to offer a Best Player award each week, and I reasoned with the Roma's owner that if he were willing to offer the nominated player and his partner a dinner each week, then eventually the team members might begin to frequent the cafe and so build up his clientele. After many dinners being enjoyed each week by the winning player, no others from the team had as yet come to dine at the cafe. Still, Mattone didn't seem to begrudge his decision or hold it against me. I offered to paint the cafe walls in exchange for his generosity. He accepted, and so I spent a few weeks painting all the walls and ceilings of the cafe with the bright shapes and motifs of my life's narrative. More people now began to come in, and the owner was pleased with the cafe's new popularity. The months passed, and the last match of the season came. We duly won, and the best player had clearly been George, a young Greek who had previously played for better sides than ours and had already won this award a number of times through the season. George had taken on a second job at the start of the year, and so with limited time, he had been happy to join our team. He was very pleased about this final award, and we all knew he would be taking his wife to the Roma. She had come to every single match to watch George play, and at the end of each game she would bring the children into the dressing room, and George would play with them with uninhibited good humour. Amongst the good-natured jeers and catcalls that accompanied his announcement as the winner of this last Roma dinner were suggestions that this time he should take his girlfriend to dinner. George looked over to his wife and with a broad smile announced that he would be doing exactly that. He would be taking her to the Roma. A few weeks later, he was dead. He had driven his car to a laneway somewhere on the Bellarine Peninsula, stuffed a hose in the exhaust and blocked all the windows with rags. In the ensuing days, we heard that his wife had for many months threatened to leave him. The funeral was held at the Greek Orthodox Church in Lygon Street, North Carlton. It overflowed with so many shocked and sad people that I decided not to go in. As I stood outside, a group of wailing women suddenly came staggering out of the church. "That's his wife," someone behind me said quietly. At that moment, Mattone turned up. He was dressed in a dark blue suit and he was carrying a bunch of white carnations. He walked right up to George's wife, who was still loudly wailing and wringing her hands in the centre of a group of women who took it in turns to physically support her. He almost pushed the flowers into her face. You have to be strong, he said firmly. He raised his voice. Stop crying. People started to come out of the church to see what was happening. She now stood still and quiet and looked at him and then at the flowers. She then dried her eyes with the fleshy part of both palms and raised herself to her full height. She turned and re-entered the church, still surrounded by 6 or 7 women who followed her in. A few of us made our way right behind them. People stood aside as she walked up the aisle to the open casket, propped up on a platform at the very front of the altar. She bent over and kissed her husband's lips. Then she placed the flowers right on his chest and sat down at the place reserved for her in the first row of pews. A deep silence settled over the mourners. The priest had, in the meantime, walked up a small wooden staircase to the pulpit, but after standing there for a minute or so, unsure as to how to resume the service, he walked down again, right over to George's wife. People squeezed up so he could sit down next to her, and after doing so, he took her hand in his. Everyone then went very quiet, and we all either sat and stood where we were, quite still. No one knew what to do or what would happen next. After a while, Mattone suddenly stood up in his pew, right at the very back. He stood like that for a minute, looking around slowly at the assembled throng. Then he said loudly, in a faltering Greek, unmistakably accented by his Sicilian dialect, "All right now, everyone back to my place." And everyone did go back to his place. He must have been extremely confident that his order, unemphatic as it might have been seen by some, would be obeyed, because he had everything prepared back at his place, which was just around the corner. Food, drink. The service was interrupted, but was resumed on an entirely different level, in an entirely different spirit. Mattone is now gone, but that memory remains as solid as a brick in my consciousness. You can never make final decisions about people. We're all bound to be surprised if we do. Until tomorrow, the last memory of Elgin Street, and onto Park Street, the third East-West Street. Its colour is yellow. Until then.